we had done really well that first year, so we were kind of on path. Mm-hmm. And it came down to contract negotiations. They walked and basically took almost half the practice with them. So we were like already mortgaged out heavily, like big loan payments for the purchase.
Yeah.
And so we started kind of like freaking out. We had to like amortize the loan a little longer. And then we basically rebuilt up again. Like we went up another, whatever. We built the practice up another, I would say 25% after the year that they left. And then COVID hit and it went back down again. And we were like, oh my God. And then we started coaching you guys a year after for me. And that's when you guys kind of stepped into the vitality test for us. And that was like, it was like now we have something that we can use.
Yeah. Just to measure progress objectively. And welcome to another episode of the Informed Chiropractor. This is Dr. Don McDonald, your host, and today I think these guys might be the closest people I've interviewed if you were to drive. So I think we're probably about 6 or 7 hour drive, ish, 6 hour drive away. So it's actually pretty close there in northern British Columbia. Dr. Sarah Tremblay and Dr. Travis Philpot are awesome chiropractors, and they graduated from CMCC. They started practice in West Bank in Kelowna. They were in the same class. I was asking this before, and they waited to the end before they hooked up, so that just in case you never want to date someone in your own class right in the first semester and then all of a sudden break up, and then it makes it kind of awkward in chiropractic school. So, but you guys are like chiropractic sweethearts that have married and have kids, and I really wanted to get them on here because they got out of school, got into practice, got things rolling, but kind of got stuck at a plateau for a pretty long period of time. And they worked with us in our 90-day mentoring program, and they've been in our Informed Chiropractor group. They've been to a couple of seminars that we've done. And just in the last couple of years, they just really like cranked through the ceiling. And so I'm like, I always love to share inspiring stories like that because there's a lot of chiropractors out there that feel like they're kind of a little stagnant and stuck. So welcome to the podcast, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us, Don.
Glad to be here.
That's awesome. We're excited to get you in there. We're going to be seeing you here in Denver on May 4th for that lower spine McDonald safety corridor. So that'll be fun too. So first of all, let's get into your guys' kind of origin stories. Like, did you guys know each other before chiropractic school?
No.
All right. So tell us each one of your little journeys to get into the same class.
Ladies first.
I was under chiropractic care as a teenager. Started going when I was probably 15 or 16. And my chiropractor knew exactly how to talk to me, which is, you should never tell me I should do something. You should just suggest it subtly, and then I need to make it my own idea.
That sounds like how my grandpa was. He always had to make sure you had to do a sneaky way, because if you found out you told him, he wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Exactly. And so her and I did the same undergraduate program, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do after I graduated from university. And she just said to me one day in one of our visits, like, hey, I didn't decide that I was going to go to chiropractic school until I walked across the stage at convocation. And I was like, okay. So I like mulled it over, and then eventually was like, hey, maybe I should go to chiropractic college.
That's cool.
And then I had it in my mind because I didn't have the like prereqs to go to any American schools. And so I was like, if I don't get in to CMCC, I'm not going to be a chiropractor. And so I did all the interviews. I had some friends who were already in there, so I was able to like get a lot of the kind of, dirt on what I should know and things to prepare myself for the interview questions and whatnot. And lo and behold, I ended up in the class of 2008.
2008. So that's when you started. You started? Yeah, 2000.
Oh no, we started in 2004.
Yeah. 2004. Oh, that was your graduation. So 2008. That's cool. So you get in there, and how did you like school at the very beginning? Like, how was it for you?
It felt like a fire hose of information. Like university and college were very different experiences for me. Like university felt like a really challenging way to like receive information, and it was just really different from what I was used to in high school. And then chiropractic college, it was never like I don't understand this. It was like there was just so much coming at you that you're like, okay, what's the most important thing that I need to hold on to from this?
Totally.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the first year was decent in that it was just like a lot of information, but just kind of learning how to receive it. And then the second year they changed up our curriculum and it was a living school nightmare, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
And then third year things got better, and then fourth year is clinical, so it was awesome.
Oh, that's good. Then you're rolling. So, Dr. Travis, how did you get into chiropractic? What was your story to get to the same class?
Like more like a leap of faith. It was kind of weird. It was in high school, and this girl that we were sort of friends with was like, I'm thinking of being a chiropractor. And I kind of never been to one, and I was like, that sounds okay. And I kind of just looked into it a little bit, did a little bit of research, read a book. I think it was some Stevenson book or something like that on like 33 principles at the time.
Well, that's a good first book to read.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's a little bit deeper. You're like, holy crap, this is the
Kind of dry.
laws of the universe.
Like a university student. I was doing like a biology degree, and then everybody was like, when you do your master's and your PhD, and I was like, not me. I'm not. I can't be an academic like that. So like I kind of knew I was going to apply no matter what, and it was just a matter of like, do I wait, do I whatever? And my buddy's like, apply now, get it done. And I applied to CMCC. I kind of got on the wait list, so I was a little bit disheartened. And then I did all my prereqs and I got into Western States, and I was about 4 steps away from going to Portland, and then I freaked out and I was like, it's too expensive. I'm never going to pay for second year. Like I got approved for all the loans for first year, and then I just freaked out and I stopped, and there was a week where I was like, maybe I'm going to be a police officer. Oh, wow. A banker. And then I got the call, and it was like last minute, and I was like, move to Toronto. And I packed everything up in like 6 days and left.
That's so funny because I thought somewhere in my head about Western States and you guys. That's probably why the story was, is that it was almost Western States.
Yeah. Me and my best buddy got into Western States. He became a dentist, and then I forgot all about this. He's like, I got into Western States, so I almost became a chiropractor. That would have been a way different experience. But anyways, I moved to Toronto, and he went off to dental school. And school-wise, it was just, I wouldn't say like serious. It wasn't like difficult conceptually. It was more just, volume. Can you handle this volume?
Yeah.
At CMCC, they changed things. They were trying to follow like Harvard Medical School into like integrated learning, and it wasn't integrated at all. It was just a schmozzle, like doing everything all at once and like having 26 answer booklets. So nothing could ever compare to how difficult that was in my life. So you did it, and you just get it done. Like,
yeah.
Just do the hard work.
I think that's always challenging too, if you're in in a program or something, and then they change it partway through, right? And they're like, hey, this is unproven territory. We're just going to try it out on you guys.
Yeah.
Well, you guys turned out pretty good, so it wasn't that bad, hey?
No. Yeah. We were really fortunate in that, like, our class was very outspoken, so we were not afraid to voice our needs, and so they would change things as we demanded them to be. So
that's good.
It was good in that. I think like if they're going to experiment on any class, ours was the best.
Yeah, we're kind of angry.
Yeah. You guys are the least tolerant.
Yeah.
It was very interesting too, because I think our class is sort of like a 50-50 blend of like people who were sort of open to the idea of like chiropractic principle.
Yeah.
And 50-50 were like physiopractor kind of chiropractors.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting because like I don't really recall talking to Sarah about this, but I was kind of involved with a lot of like the warrior chiropractors like Ryan French and Mark Foulong and Freddie So and those guys. We kind of all went to their seminars. And Cafe of Life, Jamie Richards, they all came, and I like just went to these like events, right? And never really thought anything of it until I kind of got to more fourth year. Then I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be leaning into the principled side of chiropractic as opposed to physio there.
And that's a great point, because and then Sarah, for you, like, did you already have that kind of like vitalistic view of chiropractic before you started, or did you kind of how did you come along to that?
I just like that was kind of embedded in the relationship I had with my chiropractor as a teen. I never necessarily looked at it that way, but we definitely were approaching chiropractic from more of like a wellness strategy than necessarily a treatment for anything.
Right.
So yeah, I think that was always there. I had less, I think, of a vision coming out of chiropractic college for like how I wanted to practice than maybe Travis did. But yeah, it never felt like, the more physio approach was never natural for me. So
Right. And I think that's nice too. If you're a chiropractic patient and then you've already kind of learned, I was the same way, is that kind of, I think referred 20 people to my chiropractor when I was in college. And I think I was better at promoting chiropractic before I got to chiropractic school. And then about the 5 to 8 years after, I was horrible at it because I was the chiropractor. So I wasn't very good at explaining anymore, because I think my educated mind clouded my internal voice of what chiropractic was.
well, we've always found in practice too that we're like way better at hyping each other up than necessarily like saying you should come and see me for this. But
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
like, oh, Travis is awesome at that. You should see him for that.
Yeah, that's why we need to get our own cheerleaders, right? Because we can't cheer for ourselves, so we need a cheerleader to promote us, because we feel so bad about promoting ourselves.
Right.
That's funny. So tell me, how did you guys meet in the last year?
Oh, we knew each other all the way through.
Yeah. We were
We had.
we were in pod together in 4th year.
Yeah,
That sounds romantic.
Yeah.
it was. We sat there every second day and looked at each other and did nothing. Talked and joked, and then you'd go out for dinner, and what's your group? Yeah, oh hey, there's a party, and then you'd hang out there, and
Yeah, we
Then she begged me to date her, and I said sure.
I love these stories. They're like fishing stories. They get better as time goes on.
yeah.
That's great. And so, like, when you guys graduated, were you like, were you gonna just date for a while, or were you gonna get married right away, or did you decide, like, how did you make that decision from going to Kelowna from Toronto?
Sarah looked at me and she was like, "I'm gonna move to BC," and I was like, "With me?" And she's like,
Maybe. That a girl. Never fully commit.
And I was like, "Oh."
I'll think about it.
And so that was again, like, that was another pretty big leap of faith, I would say. And
Yeah.
we just kind of like moved in together, and she had like an associateship lined up in Kelowna, and I was, I guess, starting. There was nothing available. None of the guys in Kelowna had associateships. There was no jobs, so I just was like, I guess I'm starting a practice for nothing. And that was like, and then so you were ready to start this associateship with this other chiropractor, and at the last minute she changed all the parameters. Like, she changed the numbers, changed the date,
Basically changed the contract and everything. Like,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I think we were
Apple.
we were going on like the communication that we had, and then at the very last second, I think it was like the day before I was supposed to start,
Yeah, like
she
like
sent
that
me an
weekend.
email and was like, yeah, like this is going to be the context of how we're going to work together. And I was like, that's not what we talked about.
So Sarah started to practice.
So I was like, I guess we're working together.
Yeah, like literally, like that day, I was like, okay, so
You have a new partner instantly.
yeah. So that's the origin of how that started. But yeah, like I think we moved to Kelowna in July, and then started up our practice. That was a huge learning.
I was going to say, like, if you want to get really good at trying to grow a practice, go to the most densely populated chiropractic area in Canada, almost, and then try to grow from scratch.
Yeah.
We definitely did it the hard way first, because obviously we moved to northern BC after we bought a practice.
Yeah.
Just way easier.
Yeah, like when you purchase a practice, right? Like going from scratch, right? Yeah, it just gives you way much more of a, like, kind of a kickstart, right? Yeah. So tell me a little bit about. So we met you guys. So you moved up to BC, and how long had you been up in BC before we met you?
Well, we were friends with your best friend,
With Marty Thompson.
We kind of like learned about you and Brandy. I think Brandy had done some CA training for the BC.
Yeah, for the BC there were chiropractors. Yeah.
So we kind of heard about you guys that way when we were in Kelowna, and we knew who you were. And then, of course, started following you guys, I think, kind of before we left Kelowna.
And then, like, Kevin Holroyd had talked to us about working with some of the vitality tests and that kind of stuff with us too. And I think, yeah, it was more of a, like, we were kind of in your orbit, but not necessarily attached yet.
Well, we had a very start when we were in Kelowna. We were very like X-ray correction, kind of like a blend of CBP. And then I moved into maximized living when Sarah was pregnant with kids. So I was kind of practicing alone for 4 years, very like maximized living's kind of corrective stuff. And it just never, it was a great program, but it never really, everything was about at that time kind of being busy, like being, 1,000 a week was always the thing in those kind of programs, at least in my perspective. So like I had always felt like you're never hitting these goals. I had some buddies in Kelowna that were like rock star chiropractors, and that was like my benchmark, right? Yeah. And I could never, ever get anywhere close.
Yeah.
In this realm. Like I was like, man, what am I doing? I'm doing friggin' wall screenings. I'm doing home shows, health fairs, crystals, and all the things in the world to like get busy, like counseling, coaching,
manifesting,
everything. I couldn't break anything ever, and it was like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down in Kelowna. And I had like very good, successful friends there. I just could not emulate their style. I just like, and you were basically like you're pregnant for 4 years, or well, not 4 years, but
2 kids.
Sarah was off work for 4 years, and then kind of came back part time. Kind of like 2015.
Yeah.
Really, it was like a year and a half.
Yeah.
And kind of got back in, and then we kind of got into more like epic practice, kind of way maximized living model, and really liked that. Yeah. Then we to the point where we were like, we just can't do this here anymore. My family was 7 hours north. Sarah's family was in Ontario, in Florida. So we were like, let's make a change.
Yeah. And so what kind of, so that's what you did, you purchased the practice where you are now.
Yeah.
Well, and so did you guys want, like, is that kind of where you're targeting to go? Is that, or were you just looking for practices for sale and now it's closer to where you wanted to go?
We started looking for opportunities in the north to be closer to Travis's family.
Yeah.
And then, this was the one that kind of started to have some appealing things about it.
It was listed originally as an associateship.
Yeah.
And then once we got to talking, he's like, well, I'd like to leave. And sell as ideal. And then we kind of looked into numbers.
Yeah.
They were really good.
Yeah.
Really good. And we just kind of went from there. And we still had the practice in West Bank, and that was also a painful learning curve. Because we got the wrong associate to take over the practice at West Bank, and he tanked it within 6 months.
Oh, really? And then it was basically out of business kind of thing.
Out of business. Yeah.
Wow.
Multiple practices and 12 hours away from one another. Oof, not easy.
Not. And now tell me a bit about you, like, just as far as practice style goes. So you guys went from the structural stuff with like CBP to the epic, and then we went into, you heard about the vitality shift, and then we talked a little bit about maybe optimizing function and just changing up communication and finding your own style. Tell me a bit about those first few years with the new practice.
We definitely spent the first year just kind of getting to know people and kind of copying the owners as best as possible. We had a bunch of staff and stuff, and we inherited 2 associates, a husband and wife, which we knew prior to graduating CMCC because they were in the same school. So we're like, oh, cool, we know these guys. We're like, we just basically spent the first year and a half just kind of
trying to be just chameleons in the practice, like
chameleons,
to fit into like what everyone was used to not alienate anyone. So
we turned up the new patient machine so that we really, in our first year, we only lost 2.7% of the volume.
That's great. Yeah.
Because we were anticipating at least 15 or 20, maybe 25, a quarter of the practice walking away, which it may have, but we replaced it with new patients. And we would have actually beat the record of the prior owners, but the other doc went on mat leave. So I was like, we were on track to do that. And then the following year was the associates renewal, and that ended in fire.
Yeah. So that was the separation. That was the ending of that, which was a little bit of trauma.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for helping us.
Yeah, it's okay. We can just say it's a little bit really helpful. But again, like, these are all these things, right? All these things that happen for us, they feel horrible at the moment, but then sometimes the learning that we have afterwards is huge. So at this, like, let's just go to the part where right after the associates had left, and you guys are up there kind of a little bit frustrated, maybe a little bit resentful, thinking about what's going on. Tell me a little bit about where your mindset was at as far as like, because it is frustrating, because I know a lot of chiropractors we've worked with, if they set these pretty big goals and they don't really have a good way to get them and they never actually hit their goals, it just chips away at your self-esteem. So like, kind of how are you guys feeling at that point?
I think we had done really well that first year, so we were kind of on path.
Mm-hmm.
And it came down to contract negotiations. They walked and basically took almost half the practice with them. So we were like already mortgaged out heavily, like big loan payments for the purchase.
Yeah.
And so we started kind of like freaking out. We had to like amortize the loan a little longer, and then we basically rebuilt up again. Like we went up another, whatever, we built the practice up another, I would say 25% after the year that they left, and then COVID hit and it went back down again. And we were like, oh my God. And then we started coaching you guys a year after. So I was like, oh, man, I missed being able to use X-ray as like a education tool, and we had scans. And we were trying to transition to like functional, because that's really all we had, because the practice we didn't have X-ray.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was a big curve for me, and that's when you guys kind of stepped into the vitality test. So now it was like now we have something that we can use.
Yeah. Just to measure progress objectively. Well, and just for those that are listening, in British Columbia, they changed the rules, so it made it extremely hard for taking X-rays. And so if someone in the past had basically primarily used X-rays as an objective tool or a patient education tool, and then suddenly it became very taboo to take X-rays, it'd be very challenging for your practice style, right? Because that was kind of your mojo for getting people on track, right?
Yeah.
And along with that, like a lot of the other programs that we had worked with were US based. So their communication as far as like social media or marketing, or even the things that you were allowed to say at, let's say, a screening event, were severely restricted as well.
Oh yeah, marketing.
We had to shrink our communication around what chiropractic was about, unfortunately, as far as external marketing or conversations would go. So that the X-ray and then that on top of that kind of had to make us look for strategies that were usable for us in British Columbia to talk about how chiropractic is still applicable in ways that are within the board's guidelines.
Acceptable.
Well, and I think it's quite interesting, because like often when we're in the most restricted areas, it actually forces you to become the most creative, and also if we are living in that salutogenic lens where we actually want to actually build health rather than treat conditions or disease, it does force us to be able to be a lot better at linking that stuff, because we could talk about improved function, improved spine, and then there's a lot of benefits that happen to surround that. But it is easier if you could just label it in the pathogenic model. Like, do you have like all these banned words like colic or blah, 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 that you're not actually allowed to say in our areas? So I do find it is a little bit more challenging, because you have to be more creative on how to get your word out there.
For sure.
Yeah, big time.
And as terrible of a time as the COVID kind of practice period was, it was actually really excellent for us as far as like tailoring our schedules. Like we went down to a day and a half a week.
Yeah. Emergency patients.
Yeah. And what do we?
Everybody's winking.
Yeah. When we were looking at going back to more full time, we looked at ourselves and what we wanted to do as far as going back to work, and made our schedules tighter and more productive in the time that we were in the office. So it ended up being very good for us as far as like rebuilding goes.
Yeah, open another half day, open another hour.
Yeah.
I'm here for 4 days or 5 days.
That's so good, because that's people do the opposite, right? They go, I'm going to open up all these hours and then hopefully fill them. It's like,
yeah,
that's tolerable for your energy too, because if you're sitting around the office and you're like, that's good though, because you're high energy every shift, and then if you get full, you add one, so that it's kind of like you're having almost a little bit more energy at the end of the day, rather than my stories. Like when I first opened practice again, we opened like from scratch, and so one day I had one patient in the morning and one in the afternoon, and I was playing solitaire on the computer all day. And then when I drove home, I scratched the whole side of my truck backing up because I think I was like half brain dead, because you're just basically sitting around all day, like. And then, you know, practice member would come in and you'd almost be upset because you're like, man, I almost won this game. Like, they're totally interrupting me with my computer games. You know, it was like, so I totally get that's the best way to do is you like fill it up first and then expand it from there.
Yeah, that was a really mix. And that's kind of when we started hanging out with you guys and did a little more. We did the vitality shift right around then, right when we started opening back up.
Yeah.
And I guess you were we started with you in kind of late 2022. That was probably a very transitional time for me, physically, emotionally, with chiropractic. It was.
Tell me a little bit about that, because you guys went through a big, and it was probably over was it a 2-year period that you guys grew really, like, because it's funny, because we worked with you, we always say if we do our job right over 90 days, you should actually be growing afterwards. Not, some coaching programs, you just go up during the coaching program, and because it's not really authentically you kind of come back. What was that time frame that you really had that growth?
Yeah, we hit a certain number 1 year after, like I'd call it 2021. We kind of hit this number, and then when we started coaching with you, we had a 50% growth after that number. So we had 50% increase.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. Okay. So I think the moment was like, you're like, man, you already know the care plan. You used to do these x-rays, you used to do like 70 visit care plans. And I was like in between, like 3 times a week. And do I just do this? Maybe I should just recommend it for 3 weeks and just be this wellness recommender. And I was just totally in left field, even though I knew what I knew. I knew what they needed.
Yeah.
You were like, just recommend an extra visit for that guy if he needs it. And then all of a sudden our practice bumped up like 20 visits that week. And I was like, oh, okay. Just recommend care. Like I just lost that. And
yeah. Well, I think that probably goes with your confidence too, right? I think that goes with your confidence.
Yeah. So it was very interesting. And I was like, oh, well, obviously this person who's coming because we had taken this practice over, and there was people who came, twice a year, weeks, every week, whenever it hurts, whatever, right? So these people would all show back up like reactivations, and I just let them do it. And then you're like, do they need another visit this week? And they need like 6, So yeah, come see me on Friday. Okay. Okay, maybe we should do reactivation or like a reeval and see if you maybe you should come every 2 weeks instead of whenever you want. Yeah, okay. And then it just started moving like that. And I was like, oh yeah, okay.
We also reached a place in practice where we take things a lot less personally, because things opened up for us. Like a huge part of our focus with you guys was like just getting our financial house in order. So when we were coming at care from not like needing every dollar from that care plan.
Yeah, like desperation, right? Desperation salesperson. Yeah.
Exactly. So when somebody is like not really responsive to what you're telling them, we're completely okay being like, thank you, next. Like,
yeah. I see you.
Yeah, like I just we're in a place where we're like, yeah, if you're not into this, I'm happy to talk to somebody who is. Like,
yeah. It was very like the financial conversation. I've told you guys that set us up.
Yeah.
That was something that we were like an ostrich with our head in the sand. Like we knew it wasn't great. And then when Brandy kind of like dug it a little deeper for us, I honestly, like I tell people, I was like, honestly, it was so painful to me and like embarrassing that I like manifested getting COVID just so I didn't have to talk to her. Oh God. I was just like, oh God, I want to throw up. She's just like poking. And I was like, and it is exactly what we needed. Because in those 2 years we went down from like just with our head above water financially, like maybe a little bit of this, a little bit of that, super in debt, vehicles, the practice, credit card debt, all this stuff, to like all of it's pretty much gone, and we just have a home mortgage.
Nice.
Like we've taken our debt from here when we're down that far in debt to like now we're cash positive and like
savings.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Like aggressively saving for retirement. So
that's so cool. And do you think What was kind of the biggest shift in your mindset? Was it actually becoming like brutally, like Brandy always says, the brutal honesty, like let's get that? And then often people will say, yeah, and I think Sarah, like, I think she said to you, like, doesn't that bother you? Or like, I think I'm nervous for you. And you're like, well, it does bother me a bit. But it's like, when you kind of get that awareness of how bad it is, like you almost need that, right? It almost to kind of wake you up.
That's, I think, the only thing that came for me.
I think that like I'm somebody who just needs like a plan, a strategy. So, and then you guys were able to be like, here's a simple way to just get that rolling. And we owed so many people money that it just felt like we were like, okay, so we're just gonna, take care of everyone. Whereas instead of, we started with one.
We owed my mother's.
And then rolled it into the next, and then into the next. And we paid off like over $100,000 in debt in that first year.
That is so good.
That was crazy.
And
we owed my mother something because she kind of like helped us bankroll the practice in West Bank, and we still hadn't finished paying it off. And then I was like, well, if anyone's going to get a lump sum of money that I have sitting around, it's going to be my mother, not the bank.
Yeah.
So she got it, and that was it. And it was honestly like when you guys were talking about that Dave Ramsey thing, I was barf. And it worked. And I was like,
the snowball debt payment. Yeah.
Well,
that's awesome.
We did a change of our like marketing strategy too after we worked with you. And we worked with a company that just kind of put us out there as far as like Facebook marketing, and nobody here was doing that. So it was like a astronomical change as far as like getting people into the office. But it also encouraged us to create a system with the vitality test actually for our new patient visit. So we actually take the vitality tests that we find the most change in, and also the most because some of them are more like visibly changeable than others.
Right.
So we turned those into like a scoring system, and so people kind of get a little bit of a grade on their first visit. And then we integrated those into like how we do progress exams, so that like people are seeing how that's changing over time as well. And that's been really helpful for us for like having some cool stuff for people to look at when they first come in, but also for them to see how they're progressing through care.
Well, it was kind of like the idea of, I had signed up for like Miles Watson's cash practice 100 years ago.
I remember that. Yeah.
And then he had the whole scoring system with a bunch of the tests. Some of them were a little bit whatever, and never really got into using that very well. And then Insight had their like 3-score core score. So what I basically was like, okay, well, we get the core score from the thermal and the HRV, and then, well, Don showed us the Middlemeyer's test and the one-leg balance test and the heel-toe walk, and I was like, okay, well, these are the perfect scores. You get a perfect score, you get 5 out of 5. And then somewhere in the grades, we took 5 scores and we averaged them out of 25, and then we give them a grade. And so it's something objective that they can shoot for. And then we have like, hey, if you can score like 85%, you are very close to wellness. And this is in our ideals. Like, if you can be there, or if you can be at 85% on these 5 tests, effectively you should be under wellness, because nobody's ever going to be 100.
Right.
You're 80 to 100%, you're going to be functioning well. So everything's about nerve function.
That's great. That's cool.
Structure. And then if you get the x-rays from the lab or the x-ray department, you can actually say, well, now look.
Yeah. So, it's just a bonus thing. I always say, I always say we're kind of like a lawyer, and all those little pieces of objective findings are like pieces of evidence, right? That we could just kind of tell the story. That's great. Now tell us a little bit about the, because we also got over COVID, got a lot more into the polyvagal theory. And so what are some of the kind of principles of the polyvagal theory did you implement through that? Because it's funny, because it's basically the vitality shift was the precursor to the polyvagal, and it's all very linear linked, just the language might be slightly different. But what are some of the key components you guys learned from the polyvagal theory?
I think a lot of it was more about like recognizing some of the patient interactions that we were having, and then even yeah, even with like looking at how our staff was performing as well. We have one staff member who like needs a lot more breaks than everybody else. And then we also have, like we've talked about it in some seminars before about biological rudeness. And that was a huge thing going through COVID and afterwards.
Yep.
So like learning that that's somebody's like their state at that moment, and it has nothing to do with how you're performing or like how warm or welcoming you are or how hard you've worked to build a safe environment for anyone.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, and it's hard to not like dig into it with people. So you're like, oh, I see this is going on. How can we have a conversation about it? But it's not always something you need to have a conversation about.
Totally. It just needs to be observed.
Yeah.
I've used it a little bit more like when I'm communicating with like heart rate variability, whereas like, it's easy to kind of say, hey, you see a terrible heart rate variability that's in the sympathetics and telling me you're kind of like a grizzly bear that's growling, like your RPMs are right. He's like, yeah, or like even to the point where you get like a man who never says anything. This is back on the intake forms.
Yeah.
And you get that heart rate variability and you're like, what's going on? What do you mean? It's like, yeah, there's your nerve system's in a stress response right now. Oh, nothing. I was like, yeah, okay. And then you just kind of go on. He's like, well, maybe I'm getting divorced. And for me, it's like, hey, listen, I'm not taking away your stress. Yeah, but I'm gonna help your body not break down stuff by getting adjusted. So it's a little bit more realistic conversations for me. It's like saying like, I'm not expecting miracles here.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna, you need this. This, is gonna try to help regulate you from the inside out. So it moves the conversation away from rib pain.
Yeah, and I think it's very relatable. Like when you talk about safety or ease in that comfort zone, it's very like understandable language. Because sometimes I think in chiropractic, if we get a little bit into our lingo, sometimes like people don't understand it as much. But I think sometimes using those polyvagal words to be able to come across the chiropractic principles, sometimes I find that people open up. And then all of a sudden, then now you start to see patterns. And then I love doing this too, where you say, and then someone who is experiencing what you are experiencing might also experience this and this and this and this. And they're like, holy cow, like, are you like a mind reader? Like, that's insane.
Yeah. Or else, I like the other one too, when you get like the mom, like 3 kids and all the teenager kids, right? And they're like, HRV is like low autonomic tone. And it's like, your gas tank's empty. You need to build that back up or you're in trouble. Like, it's not like left or right necessarily, like, yeah, adaptable side to side. Like the adjustments are going to help you do this. And then it's like, you also need, some new time, maybe, other things that are going to fill your bucket. And it's just like, so it's, you can speak to them better than just, the old school. I always like the old school lecturers, like, well, your curve is straight, so you need 70 visits. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about?
And then we'll fix it, right? And then we'll fix it.
So it's like a more authentic conversation, right? And so even if they're like, you really, the way I can make care plans now is like, we get better results with less visits. I guess maybe that's just the thing, is you get better as a chiropractor.
Yep.
But you can see, like, based on what these tests are showing me, you're in rough shape. And you can be really truthful. Even if their x-ray looks like garbage or not, like, it tells me they're functioning, right? Like, I get that you don't want to be here very often, but you need to. And they're like, oh, okay. It's like, so the best recommendation, I'd say, let's say you need twice a week for 3 months. And they're like, whew. Like, they're actually seemingly open to, like, I don't like to call it negotiating, but you kind of have to, right? Like,
yeah.
As long as you understand that you're in rough shape, I'm happy to see you every 2 weeks because you can't afford care or you can't come that often, you live out of town or you work. Just as long as you understand that it's not ideal.
Yeah, that's not the recommendation.
You still make some headway, but it's not going to be fast if you're okay with that. And so that's something like I didn't possess when I was in college. I just couldn't. because everybody is, just, you need 80 visits. Your neck says so. That's not happening, doc.
Now, curious, you guys have come to a couple of adjusting seminars too, because the nice thing I love about the Polyvagal Theory, basically, it's just like chiropractic principles. It can thread through everything in our life, like whether it's your communications, your relationships, all that kind of stuff. What kind of things have you done maybe that has changed up your actual adjusting, just adjusting through a polyvagal lens?
Well, our approach has always been very spinal. Like, we do adjust extremities like here and there, but I would say that in the seminars that we've taken, which I think we've taken them all except level 2, which we're doing with you in Denver.
Yep.
We already possessed the spinal adjusting skills. Like, there are obviously going to be little tweaks that we have made that have up-leveled our adjustments for sure. But a lot of the extremity things were things that I never would have thought to look for before. Because we just came from such a pure kind of spinal health
Pseudo mix.
paradigm. And then especially a lot of the tissue threat things that we have talked about in seminar as well. Like, our class was also the first one at CMCC that they had a heavy emphasis on MRT. So we got a lot of that in technique class. And so when we're addressing spinal things, as a value add, sometimes we'll toss in some MRT passes. And then we, in our conversation, we would, with Brandy, she's like, you're sometimes assaulting somebody, basically, or their nervous system is perceiving it that way.
Right.
Because it can be quite painful, and you're stripping a muscle that you're trying to get to calm down instead of flaring it up. And so some of the soft tissue approaches, and even the extremity adjusting, the way you teach it is definitely not what we learned at school. It's the yank and pray, basically. And then you teach it in such a way that it's a gentle kind of traction, and then a release, and then more of a flick than anything else. So all of that was way more effective, and B, a lot less traumatic for us being adjusted, but also for our patients. And so when we're seeing them now, they're like, oh, nobody's ever done that for me before in all the 12 other chiropractors I've seen in my entire life. Because we have a lot of people who come up from other places to work.
Right.
And I've been under chiropractic care forever, and nobody's ever even looked at that for me before. And so, our brains just travel in different paths now than they ever did before we worked, for sure.
Well, my take on that too, the occiput adjustment I loved from the upper spine part, and the first rib adjustment were awesome. And there was that back to that tissue safety.
Yeah.
And so when you're going to adjust the occiput, I always found people were so guarded. And it was prior to learning that move, it was man, I just cranking on heads. It was just the most painful experience to give an adjustment, and I couldn't even imagine being patient.
Yeah.
And you had that tissue load, you loaded to the max, right? You were you were basically told me, this is the maximum you're ever getting as a patient. You tell their nervous system, and then they accept that that's going to be the worst case scenario, and then you can come at 50% and adjust. That was cool. And then the way you also laid out the extremity adjusting, because I was I don't know, we used to adjust a lot of extremities just because they were I have foot pain. You did that to me, and I eyes open. But how the hip and the shoulder are very interesting. The protected hip and the protected shoulder, because you're okay, now feel the muscles. And after you adjust the hip joint, the muscles relax. And I was oh, so we're in the joint, because I was just mixing whatever, right? I just want to adjust for neurology. And then you put it into a neurology conversation. You said the neurology is protecting because the joint's stuck. So when you release the joints, now the muscles can finally start to restore normal tone. And I was oh, okay. So that's so easy to explain to a patient. And it's like, that joint's so stuck that the muscles, and I could MRT that forever, or put my elbow in it, and you can roll it,
Laser it. Yeah.
Just, it's the same thing over and over. Like, how you're just doing glute passes for these patients just to feel like you're doing something for them. And now it's like, okay, this is good. So the protected hip is like, I have 2 or 3 people that are supposed to have hip replacements who are like, actually saying, you phone Dawn and tell him thank you for me.
That's awesome. We're getting that opening up. Now, we're getting close to the end there, but I just wanted to jump a little bit because, Sarah, you actually wrote a book, didn't you, on the polyvagal theory? Tell everybody else about your book that you did.
Well, it has a small portion of polyvagal theory in it, but mostly it was my intention with it was those people who do come in with their HRV that is like fully tanked, because in our experience we found that those people tend to be the slowest ones to heal and get better, and that HRV is the thing, unless they're like really working on it, that it takes the longest to change,
to come around. Totally. Yeah.
So instead of me telling them like you should be relaxing and meditating and finding stuff to do on your own, I wrote the book as a sort of guide for and my target audience is definitely families, because that's who I practice with. So yeah, it's like home care basically for the patients who want to start to look at some of their own ability to change that HRV and their vagal state.
That's awesome. So you just have it, so it's going to be like kind of complementary to chiropractic care.
Yeah, it's like there are a couple of mentions of chiropractic and how it's the most direct access to change what's going on with your vagus, but it's definitely more for that additional home care.
That's cool. What's it called?
It's got a long title.
Go get it. So grab a pencil.
Grab a pencil. Yeah.
Sarah feels embarrassed about
Well, that's just like how we all do. So
backwards.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, no, that's good. I can see that. The Complete Guide to Vagus Nerve Self-Care. Nice. Awesome.
You could.
Yeah. And then you get a copy of it like on Amazon, or is it where can you get a copy?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, and there's digital copies and also the paper copies. I just ordered a bulk order for the office because we want to integrate it into patient care, but
well, that's cool. Well, I'll see if you can send me a link to it or whatever, and I can put it in the show notes, and that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, thanks guys for showing up. Last words of inspiration. What do you want to leave everybody with from listening to this podcast? Anything that wants to, maybe if they ever felt like kind of stuck or financially destroyed or frustrated or anything, what kind of words would you like to leave them with?
Well, leaning into the pain,
Isn't it?
and just being like knowing why it's there, I guess, is very, I don't mean back pain. I just think about Brandy. I always give it like a little knife in my gut, and man, and that was, you needed it. You almost needed to be embarrassed for yourself to then find the solution. And this is something take the hard path first, because you do the hard work now and it gets easy.
Well, that's wise words of wisdom. Sarah, what do you want to leave everybody with?
Like keep trying stuff. Like if what you're doing isn't working, you've got to kind of think about ways that you can grow with a different attack, a different train of thought, or a different activity, because we were stuck for a really long time and it just seemed like we couldn't move beyond a certain volume that we were stuck at, or a certain income. It didn't matter how big our team was or how many chiropractors we had working with us. We just couldn't do it. And then when we started to look at it from different angles and change up the way that we did our procedures, it really kind of streamlined things for us, and we're able to do a lot more, but with a lot less energetic output from us. So yeah, just keep trying stuff. Just keep seeing what you can do. Because my biggest challenge was that none of the things that we were doing before ever felt authentic to me. So always a script that I was like, I really don't like this.
Yeah.
So moving into like what felt like honest and like something that I would actually say, not just something someone else had written for me, was the big shift, I think, in just keep finding what feels right for you.
Yeah, I think too, that's a really important part, is that there is a way to be an authentic chiropractor. So you can do procedures, communicate, talk about chiropractic, adjust in an authentic way to you. I think just if you don't know what that authentic way is, you have to just see a whole bunch of different ways people do it, but just realize that there's going to be not proper, but an ideal way that becomes more authentic for you. And then that's more sustainable success. And that's what we always want to do with that 90 days, is try to kind of figure out what's the path that you could be on that actually is authentic, so that you don't need to have motivation from the outside. You can keep it going because it's actually who you are.
Well, like we said, like the 90 days is such a good thing for us to do originally, because you were like, yeah, just say it. You know it, say it. And you're like, oh, okay. So you find your authentic voice more. And I guess coming on to that again is saying, no matter what, no matter how much growth you experience, you're going to hit that ceiling. And we are there now. And hence why we would like to do another 90-day plan with you guys, because you're so good at seeing what we can't. And that's, I think, when you find somebody that can coach, even though like maybe you have a vision to get to here, but that coach, and like, you know, it's like having a consultant come in and say, okay, well, that's the gap that you're missing. And that's what I'm hoping we can achieve. You guys, again, is like, you could look into it a little bit more and say, okay, well, these look good, this looks good. And then, hey, there's that one thing that you're missing that you might add in. It goes, but
it has to be the linchpin. We're always looking for linchpins, baby.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks guys so much for being on the call. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's great. We went a little longer today, but we had double the trouble, so we had double the time. So we had a little extra time on it. So I really appreciate it. Hope you guys are all doing an awesome day out there. Got a lot of good information from this episode, and we will see you again in a couple of weeks.